Hey guys, what is going on? This is Carnivore5, and today we're going to continue our top 10 series, and we're going to move on to catchers for today. So we're going to start position players. Figured I'd start at catchers. Now I will say before I get into the honorable mentions that this list was pretty thin. I really think the top three are pretty obvious. I also do want to point out that for this one, I'm going to include multiple versions of each card because the positions were really thin, and I found that there was a lot of honestly, there were some big differences between some of the variations in cards. I think you guys are probably all aware, the Posies and Basadas all have, and the Luquois all have multiple variations of cards, including their live series and some flashbacks. So let's go ahead and get started and move on to our honorable mentions. Again, this list is very thin, but one honorable mention I do want to throw in there is Grandel. He does hit righties pretty well with 80 pop. Doesn't hit lefties very well. His vision's not the greatest. He's okay defensively. Kind of just meh. But there's not too many catchers to choose from. But if you ever do get an opportunity to draft a catcher like this in something like Battle Royale, or if there's ever an event for it, maybe definitely give this guy consideration. But this is really a low budgety option. Let's go ahead and move on to our next honorable mention. Next honorable mention is again another switch hitter. I kind of like this one a little bit more than a Grandel, but he doesn't hit righties as well. But he's a little more balanced. At least he can hit righties somewhat. Hits lefties pretty well. My problem with this card is he's very, very slow, but he actually does have some pretty decent fielding. 80 fielding, 84 arm strength, and this card doesn't cost you a whole lot, only about 1,800 stubs as you can see there. So this is definitely a solid budget option as well. Another honorable mention, again, a lot of these guys are really only going to hit against righties or lefties because the catcher position is just very, very thin. Stephen Vogt, this all-star flashback, 81 power versus righties, and that's really all he does. Defense isn't the greatest. But again, if you get an opportunity to draft this card in BR, I would highly recommend it because there's just not too many great hitting catchers, especially in the silvers. So go and move on here. I really wanted to find a place for Gary Sanchez in the top 10. He is a pretty balanced hitter. He actually hits righties better than lefties, but since he does have that advantage of being a right-handed hitter facing a lefty, you can still see the ball well, and he can still drive it versus lefties with that 74 power. And of course, he usually has inside edge, so his power can get pretty crazy versus righties or lefties sometimes. Fielding is so-so. I really wanted to find a place in the top 10, but he just missed out. This card was very popular last year, and again, it is still really solid this year, but even though he's a switch hitter, we've had a lot of switch hitters already. He really only hits righties well, similar to Grandel. Hits lefties terrible, so, I mean, how much of an advantage is it being a switch hitter if you just can't hit one side very well at all? So it's almost pointless. But regardless, he is still a switch hitter. The good thing about this card is he actually has pretty solid defense, good fielding, arm strength, and good blocking. So that is a plus to this card. And our last honorable mention is going to be this impact veteran, Carlton Fisk. Now, again, I really wanted to find a place for him in the top 10. I love this guy's power. I just think, even though I favor power a lot, I just think his contact and his plate vision, honestly, his plate vision is not too bad, but his contact is just a little bit too low for me. But if you get an opportunity to get this card in BR, I would highly recommend it, especially since, the difficulty's on All-Star for BR. The fielding is kind of meh. I mean, it's above average or whatever for a catcher in the low 70s. He actually has pretty decent speed for a catcher for 47 speed. But this is not a bad card. It really just depends if you can put the PCI on the ball. This guy has some of the most power for all catchers. Now we're going to go ahead and move on to our top 10 list, starting at number 10. So starting at number 10, and this might surprise some people, is the live series Posey. I'm honestly not a real huge fan of this card, but he has such good contact and plate vision, and the fact that he has good solid defense, I had to include him in the top 10. He's also one of the few diamond catchers. Again, I want a little bit more power. But that being said, he's still a good card. I don't know, man. This game just favors power a lot more than it does contact. I mean, that being said, there's a lot of cool things you can do with this card. Hit and runs. And if you power swing or if he's playing up, he can still hit the ball out of the ballpark. You're just not going to be as consistent with a card like this as you would with somebody with just a little bit more pop. But he does come in at number 10. Coming in at number 9 is the flashback Luquois that you get for the Team Epic for completing the Brewers. This card, again, is solid like the Posey. Good contact. Posey hits lefties a little bit better and don't hit righties quite as well. The thing that I like about this card over the Posey is that he's more balanced and that he has a little bit more power overall. Again, the problem is his power is still really low, so it's going to be hard to really hit home runs consistently and hit the gaps. That being said, it's not a bad card, and it's really cheap to do now since they don't have too many golds. So I like this card a little bit more than opposing, but I'm not huge fans of either one, to be completely honest. Coming in at number 8 is the Flashback Iannetta. Now, the fielding isn't too great for him. He has decent blocking and decent arm strength, not great speed. But the reason I kind of like this card over the previous two is that he has a lot more power. Not the best vision, but he does have a little bit more contact than, say, the Impact veteran Carlton Fisk. I thought his contact was just a little bit too low. That being said, your PCI is still going to be somewhat pretty small with Iannetta. So it's really kind of preference at this point. I would just prefer to have a card that I know that I square up, I'm going to be hitting home runs and hitting the gap and hitting the ball hard. Rather Posey, you're just going to have, you know, weaker flyouts or warning track flyouts, him and Lucroy. So I put this card at number 8. This is kind of a ballsy move to put him at number 8. Probably a lot of you wouldn't even have him in the top 10. I'm not sure, but he does come in at number 8 for me. Coming in at number 7, I have the Flashback Hardware Giovanni Soto for the Cubs. This is kind of a weird card. It doesn't look like it's really anything special, but what I really do like about this card is he's a balanced hitter, and he has enough power versus both sides, or versus both pitchers, righty or lefty. And his contact isn't the greatest. He does hit lefties a little bit better, but I just really like this card. When I first got it in Conquest, I didn't think it'd be anything great, and that's another thing. It's in Conquest, so it's essentially free. That being said, I don't know. I prefer a card like this over the Posey and the Iannetta because he has a little more contact than the Iannetta, but he also has power in the 70s compared to the Posies and the Lucroys, which I prefer because if you square up a pitch, you power swing, it's going to go a long way. So this card's not too bad, and he comes in at number 7. Coming in at number 6, and this is going to surprise a lot of people, but this is honestly one of my favorite cards, especially in Battle Royale. If I can get me an Evan Gattis in Battle Royale, I'll take that card every time. He usually has inside edge. He's usually playing up, so that kind of since he's a live series player, that kind of gives him more of a bonus compared to some of those flashbacks. He plays up a ton. Like for today, he has 94 power. But even if he didn't, I would still kind of prefer a card like this, say compared to the Giovanni Soto, because he hits righties a little bit better than he does lefties. And he also has the ability to play up. Not great defensively. I honestly don't think fielding is that important for catching. I think arm strength and blocking are the things you want to look at, and those are the two things he does, above average, both at 76. Has 40 speed, so that's slightly above average. I just really do well with this card, and he has the power and good enough contact, so I put him at number 6. Coming in at number 5 is this breakout Yan Gomes. Again, you're looking at these cards, you're thinking, man, these really aren't that great. I mean, how can you have these cards in the top 10 or whatever? Guys, there's just not too many catchers right now to choose from. The thing I like about Yan Gomes is that he has good defense. So he has defense similar to like the live series Posey. Again, he has that threshold, or in my opinion, is 70 power. So you're going to be able to hit bombs with him when you square up the pitches, and he hits lefties really well. Kind of a weird splits that he has. He actually has a slightly more power versus righties, but the 95 contact versus lefties is going to allow you to power swing since your PCI is going to be a little bigger. And you're going to be able to probably hit more power against lefties than you would righties. But against righties, I do like that he has 73 power. And I would take this card in a heartbeat again over the Posey and Lucroy because he has the power. And I like him over the previous ones I mentioned, like the Gattis and the Iannetta and the Soto, because he has a little bit more contact and he can give you a little bit more protection for some of your big left-handed bats in your lineup. And he has a lot better fielding than the previous 2 or 3 cards that I mentioned. Coming in at number 4 is the Hardware Yogi Berra. Now, this is another really weird card. It has inverse splits, but these are like heavily weighted inverse splits. I haven't seen this really too often in the game, especially for a legend. But I will say, Yogi, first of all, he has fantastic defense. He has good blocking, some of the best blocking out of all catchers, and good arm strength. Again, those are the 2 key things you want to look at for catchers. He has 41 speed, which I would say is above average for a catcher. Now, talking about his hitting, I do like that 99 vision. And the 63 power doesn't seem like a lot, but you'll probably be able to power swing a 99 vision and 66 contact. At least against certain pitchers, you'll be able to anyways. So I think against righties, he'll still be able to do well because obviously he'll still have the advantage seeing the ball, a little bit easier from righties. But then against lefties, even though they'll have the advantage lefty on lefty, he absolutely crushes lefty. So this is a card you really don't have to platoon. I find cards like this, especially left-handed hitting cards that have inverse splits this drastic to be really kind of odd, and I haven't had a chance to really use this card, but I think I would take him over the previous cards I mentioned, just because of his vision and his ability to hit lefties really well, even though he's left-handed. And I think he could get the job done against righties, but this is really an interesting card. So I went ahead and put him number 4. And honestly, guys, before we move on to our top 3, I want to say that the top 3 were honestly no doubters. I mean, these cards weren't even that close to him. You could honestly interchange 10 through 4, and really any order you want, in my opinion. It just kind of comes down to preference. So I just kind of want to throw that out there before we move on to the top 3. I really think it's between, I think most people, if they did a list, they would have these in the top 3. So we'll go ahead and move on to number 3. Number 3, I have the Impact veteran Jorge Posada. So this card you get by doing the Team Epic. I find this to be a very solid card, but I will say that I'm not like the biggest fan of it. But I really don't think you could put any of the other cards that I just mentioned ahead of him. He just has very balanced hitting, and he's a switch hitter. You guys saw the previous switch hitters were nowhere as good as he was or balanced. The blocking and fielding is so-so, again, in the low 70s. You're seeing a lot of catchers in the low 70s. There's only a few in the 80s, like the Yogi Bear and the Posey. So the fielding, he gets the job done. The one downside of this card is the speed. So I will say personally from using this card that I didn't hit too great with him. I think I can actually look at his stats. Yeah, if you guys can see the stats, I'm actually hitting under 300, and I don't hit under 300 with too many cards. My problem with this card is you'll put the PCI right on the ball, and it'll just be a weak flyout a lot of the time. I really don't understand it. I know the game's hitting mechanics are kind of wacky right now, but it seems to really apply to this card. So, but I know it's a small sample size, even 127 ABs. I know that's still somewhat of a small sample size, and I don't strike out with this card. You see, he only has 5 strikeouts and he has 11 walks, so he does get do a good job getting on base for me. And he's a great hitter. You just have to be very careful at hitting into double plays, and you have to be very patient with a card like this. Don't get too aggressive with a card like this either, because he only has 72 power versus lefties, which is good, but you just don't want to overswing. You want to be really patient with a card like this. So we're going to move on to our next top 2. At number 2, I have the Hardware Posey. Now, I've kind of even surprised myself that I would put this card this high. I would have thought that I liked the Impact veteran Posada over this card because he's a switch hitter and more balanced, and especially he hits righties better. But the more I thought about it, again, I just personally don't hit too great with Jorge Posada. I think I would find this card to have a little bit more value in a lineup such as mine, because this card will give great protection to your left-handed bats. And I just really value that protection this year, since lineups have to be balanced and we can't see the pitchers handing us before games. You also have to add in the fact that this card has really good fielding compared to a lot of other catchers. 84 blocking and 70 arm strength, which his arm strength is a little bit higher. And he also has 48 speed, which again is pretty solid for a catcher. Against righties, he's not too bad. He's kind of like, I think Lucroy is around that. So, but again, I definitely give this one a huge advantage over the Live Series. The Live Series is kind of similar to this in a way. It just doesn't have as much power and contact versus lefties. So I put this card at number 2. And the number 1 card I have on my list is the Breakout Jorge Posada. Now, I know the argument can be made that the Impact veteran Posada might be better. He does have more vision and contact, but again, I favor power a little bit more. And I really like the versatility and the balance of this card. He's also a little bit faster than the other Posada and has a little bit better defense. His fielding actually is pretty solid. 78 fielding, 78 arm strength, which was the same as the Hardware Posey, and 75 blocking. So pretty solid all the way around. He's a little bit faster. 23 speed, still pretty awful, but definitely, I mean, that's twice as fast as the other Posada. Now, the main reason that I like this card over the other Posada is the power. I just find that the other Posada didn't have enough oomph, especially if you hit the ball to center field with the other Posada, it was almost always a fly out. This card I feel like has just a lot more power, and he's going to be able to hit you home runs to all fields. So I put this card number 1. So let me know what you guys think of my list. I know it was kind of weird, and a lot of you guys may disagree. Again, I just ask you to just keep it respectful. If you guys disagree, that's fine. I know this really came down to me preferring power over contact for a lot of these cards. Anyways, I hope to move on to probably first base next. So yeah, hopefully you guys are enjoying the series. Thanks for watching the video. This is card number 5 signing out. Peace.